Hi folks, Dave, the Honest Audiophile. This is the Meze Audio 105 Silva, and these are my Honest Audiophile impressions. I want to thank Meze Audio for providing the 105 Silva for review. Greatly appreciate it. Meze Audio, you rock. Alright, so the Meze Audio 105 Silva, these will set you back $500 from your bank account. They are a 50mm dynamic driver open back headphone, 42 ohms of impedance, and 112 decibels of sensitivity, frequency response range of 5 Hz to 30 kilohertz. They weigh roughly 354 grams, and they come in this gray box. You get some information on the back, a little bit of brand information on the front, brand logo on one side, lifting it up, and you get a carrying case. The 105 Silvas come in this black case, pretty standard for Meze. Get a little bit of branding, hard shell, very good quality. Definitely will protect your headphones and not take up a whole lot of room in the bag. And as you can see, the headphones themselves, the 105 Silvas, sit very snugly inside. You get a little carrying pouch for the included cable. The carrying pouch isn't really going to protect anything. It's pretty much just a soft padded little black case. All right, and then you get a cloth cable. Connects with 3.5 into the headphones, listed with L and R on them, so you know which is which. A small split, and then it turns into fabric. And it terminates into a 3.5, which apparently just came apart. Anyways, so it connects with 3.5, and then they give you a nice 1/4-inch adapter. I have to reach out to Meze about their cable falling apart. Other than that, it's a nice cable, well built, and well, until this sleeve fell off. But anyway, so fabric is nicely twisted, and it's fairly well controlled. Doesn't really twist up. From the split up, they do tangle a little bit. Not too bad. Overall, was a decent cable. Headphones. So the headphones look very similar to everything else that Meze has made, especially in the budget. You get the dual steel hanger, a big nice leather suspension strap, and then you have your open back design, very similar to the AER and the 109 Pro. This is black. You have your 3.5 inputs right there. Big cushy pads. They weigh roughly 354 grams. There's a little bit of marking that says left and right, and then it says the 105 Silva on top here. Very well built. I have no concerns about them falling apart. Popping them on your head, isolation is not very good. These are open back headphones, and you can pretty much carry on conversations with people around you, and you can hear things going on. That really does not block anything out. Comfort wise, these are quite comfortable. I was able to wear them for several hours without any issues, other than they get somewhat warm. I did find that, especially with the very warm temperatures that we're having here in the Midwest of the United States, it is getting extremely warm on the ears after a few moments of listening. So I was taking a little bit more frequent rests and breaks from wearing headphones. But most of the time when it was cooler in the room and the cooler temperatures outside, I was able to wear them for longer periods. The 105 Silva, very similar when it comes to comfort, as was the 105 AER and the 109 Pro. The source pairing of the 105 Silva is pretty good and easy. At 42 ohms of impedance, 112 decibels sensitivity, pretty much anything will drive them as long as it has decent power. Even dongles and DAPs were able to drive the 105 Silva fairly easily. I did find that it did kind of scale with more power, but if you have something at 500 milliwatts or more of power, the Silvas will be quite comfortable on them. It's not really that picky. It is picky though when it comes to the presentation of the source. Warmer sources, especially in the bottom end, is going to make the 105 Silva sound a little bit bloated and a little too full and just a little bit too impactful, and it can get bloated. But a source that's warmer in the uppers and in the mid-range is going to help the 105 Silva. And I found that it kind of takes to having a more neutral presentation with a slightly rolled off or tamed top end type of presentation from sources. So something along the lines of a Burson Playmate 3, a X-Duo XA03, things like that have a little bit tint of a warmth to them is going to be a little bit more pleasurable to some ears. If you have too much of a more clinical, neutral leaning presentation, maybe a Mytek Liberty DAC 2 or a FIO K19, something like that, it's going to sound a little bit too brittle and a little bit too spicy up top to some ears. So, how do the Meze Audio 105 Silva sound? So I found that the bass of the 105 Silva is quite pleasurable. I really did enjoy it. It has a nice extension into the sub bass, and you get a little bit of rumble and grumble. Nothing really too exciting there, but you're going to get a little when called upon in the track. Mid bass, you're going to have a little bit more of an emphasis. There's good impact, punch, and slam, and a good decent amount of texture, and you're going to have a little bit of warmth and body in the bass, and it's a fun sounding bass, but also stays well controlled and has pretty good technicalities. I found that the bass did well when it came to details and resolution, especially for the $500 price point of a headphone, and it was enjoyable. It wasn't really a neutral presentation, but it had a little bit of a fun factor, and there was just a little bit of a punch and kick, and it kept the arms flailing and the toes tapping. Tonality wise, it was pretty good as well. I found that most of the instruments and vocalists sounded fairly natural and presented accurately. Moving into the mid-range. The mid-range is a little bit of a hodgepodge of sound. From about 1K to 2K, there's a little bit of a dip, and it's a little bit on the thinner side, but there's still enough body there. I do wish I had just a little bit more fullness, a little bit more naturalism in that presentation, but I do find that the 1 to 2K region is okay. But going from 2K to 7K, there's a significant rise, and it really climbs, and it becomes very forward, and it also thins out. And I found that in the 2K to 7K region, it is a very forward, bright, and oft-times sibilant presentation, and it's very spicy sounding. I found that the mids kind of lost that naturalism that they had in the bass and in the lower mid-range, and the mids became too thin and a little bit bright and sibilant sounding, and it just had this a little too forced type of presentation. And the mids just lost the cohesion. And as you go through the octaves, instruments become thinner and more forward and more in your face, and they have a tendency to be sibilant and a tendency to be very bright sounding. And it just didn't sound as balanced and cohesive. And then going into the treble has a 10K rise that really adds in some hotness to it, and it becomes a little too sizzly. There's just a little too much emphasis in that region, and it just becomes a little too excitable. And the mids and the treble are very spicy on the 105 Silva, and I find that on certain gear and certain genres of music, it can sound very off-putting and just doesn't sound very cohesive and balanced. But if you really fiddle around with source gear and find something that's a more tame and warm and a little bit rolled off and a little bit more rounded and smoother sounding in the upper regions, the 105 Silva can be tolerated. but using it on most of my test gear, the Mytek Liberty DAC 2, and the FIO K19, it just had a little too much emphasis, and it was kind of fatiguing sounding, and it sounded somewhat unnatural. It just wasn't as natural and organic sounding as I would wish, especially in the treble. It just has too much emphasis. Soundstage of the 105 Silva is pretty decent. I found that it did a good job of showing small, medium, and large, and even going into the grand size of venues. And you can differentiate between the venue sizes. It also did a decent job of following things across the stage. You could track them from side to side, and you could place them as they went along, and as different things approached and moved around, you could follow it. It wasn't the most precise and locked on, but at the same time, it was pretty decent at saying, hey, it's over here in this neighborhood. And it was a pretty small neighborhood. Detail, retrieval, and resolution of the 105 Silva is decent. For a $500 headphone, I would say it's pretty average. It's not a technical monster. This is not something that you're going to use in a studio and be nitpicking every little bit of music that comes across your desk. This is more of an enjoyable, pleasurable type of presentation, something that's going to you're going to just sit down and listen to music with. And for that, I found that the details that it provided were good. I wasn't searching for anything saying I usually hear this, but at the same time, I wasn't exploring anything new. And then the resolution was decently good. There wasn't any egregious moments of super overly sharp or edgy crispiness to the sound, but at the same time, it wasn't rounded and smooth. So it just did as good. It did what it needed to when it came to the details and resolution. Tone and timbre is pretty good with the bass. I found that the tone and timbre of the bass is fairly natural and fairly accurate sounding, but as you go into the mids, they thin out as you go higher into the octaves of the mid-range and the treble, and it just becomes a little bit unnatural. There's a tendency to be sibilant and hot and bright, and I just found that it just didn't have quite the naturalism or the body. It was a little bit on the thinner side of things. It's not to say that it doesn't sound somewhat natural, but at the same time, it's not the most natural in its price point. So the Meze Audio 105 Silva. It's a decent headphone. How does it compare to a couple of others in its similar-ish price points? So first you have the Aune AR5000. Now the Aune AR5000 has similar bass. It's not the most emphatic and most bassy type of headphone, but at the same time it's well controlled and has good tone and timbre. Going into the mid-range, the Aune AR5000 is more even and more cohesive. Yes, it is a little bit forward, especially around 2K, but it's not as forward going all the way up to 7K. I find that the Aune AR5000 is more neutral leaning in that regard, and also is more balanced and cohesive. The Aune AR5000's treble is more extended and a little bit better controlled. It does not have as much spiciness to it. And even though it has a nice airy open soundstage, it has a little bit more details and a little bit better resolution and a little bit better placement and imaging, a little bit better depth and layering, and the tone and timbre is more natural and accurate on the Aune AR5000. And then you have the Sennheiser HD660s2. I find that the Sennheiser HD660s2 is just more neutral and natural sounding. It has a little bit more of a controlled tightness in the bass. It has a little bit more details and resolution and slightly better natural tone and timbre. And then in the mids are more natural and cohesive, more even and balanced, and have a more natural body to them and a more fullness to them, while at the same time having good air and space and just sounding more accurate and true. And then the treble is more extended and has better control and is not near as spicy as the 105 Silva. Soundstage wise isn't quite as wide as the 105 Silva, but has better depth and layering and more accurate imaging and is more precise in its placement. Also, the 660s2 is more detailed and resolving and has more accurate natural tone and timbre. So, the Meze Audio 105 Silva. I don't mind this headphone. It's okay for listening to music and just kind of enjoying it. If you like a little bit more spicy, a little bit more fun side of presentation, and you can find the correct pairing when it comes to the source and the genres of music. But to me, it's just not as good of a performer as the Aune AR5000 or the Sennheiser HD660s2, and I would prefer to listen to those two over the 105 Silva. But that's not to say I'm not going to listen to the Silva. It's just that it just isn't as good as some of the others in its price point. And it's pretty to look at, well built, very comfortable, except for on hot days like today. And it's also, you know, a little bit different. And so I like it, but I don't love it. The Meze Audio 105 Silva. Something a little bit different, a little bit unique, and something kind of spicy. It's been Dave, the Honest Audiophile. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video. Speaking of next video, somewhere on screen, subscription links, notification bells. If you haven't already, please check those off. Don't forget to give a thumbs up or a thumbs down to the video, and check out all the links down below. There's all kinds of information down there regarding how you can contact channel, follow channel, support channel. Speaking of supporting the channel, I want to thank my supporters through Patreon, YouTube memberships, and one-time gifts. Thank you very much for all that you give to the channel. It's much appreciated. If you're interested in supporting the channel, there's various ways that you can do that, so check out the links down below. Also down below, there's all kinds of other information like gear recommendations, music recommendations, and all kinds of other things, so check out the links down below. And lastly, don't forget to enjoy the music, and that honesty is the best policy.